Ah, oh, ho, ho, and a couple of tra-la-las. That's how we learn for Borg to play in the merry old land of Oz. Welcome again to the Omnist Hour. We're going to change things up a little bit today. Uh, Talk maybe in a lighter vein about a darker subject, which is kind of the contrasting sort of thing I like to do on my channel. Um, as you can see from the background, we're going to be talking about stuff related to an iconic story of children's literature and Hollywood legend. I'm titling this episode Welcome to the Hotel California, the Fool's Paradise of False Positivity. Okay, so Rob, where are we going with this? Well, let's take a little review first of this story of The Wizard of Oz. For those of you who don't remember the movie, didn't read the original book, or the many other books written by the same author, the basic story is about a girl, Dorothy, and her dog, Toto, who get whisked away from her home in Kansas, where they're in the middle of Depression era America, trying to make a small going of a small farm in a town where the rich old lady, as it happens to be, is buying up all the property in town and acts like she owns everything. So, in a way, it's somewhat related to the story that you may be familiar with, It's a Wonderful Life, which I talk about quite a bit as being one of Hollywood's great efforts to tell a story that has many possible interpretations, which is the mark of great art. Doesn't preach so much as teach. Well, let's talk about what is taught in this children's story. So, Dorothy and Toto are dealing with this situation where she feels neglected because everybody's so busy on her farm, has only her dog Toto, and this Elvira Gulch lady is sort of terrorizing her every time she goes out on her bike, complaining about her dog messing in her yard and getting in her life. And anytime Dorothy wants to talk about it, her aunt and uncle are too busy getting work done to do anything about it. And so she goes to sleep wishing she were somewhere over the rainbow where folks would actually pay attention to her and care about her problems more than their own. Which, if you think about it, is kind of the same as the narcissistic message behind all commercial messaging out of Hollywood since day one. Nobody cares about you enough like we do. We care about you so much, we've made this wonderful product that's going to solve all your problems. Whether it's a new cleaning fluid, whether it's a new refrigerator, whether it's new lipstick, new shampoo, whatever it is. This is the way products were sold. And products are still sold through Hollywood movies. Um, there's a funny, my wife and I just watched Wayne's World together, and there's a really funny segment in it where they were making fun of how products are featured in movies by talking about how they weren't going to let that be done to their show while they were featuring a bunch of products that were very common at the time, Doritos and Coke and Pepsi and everything else. Um, Great stuff. So anyway, this gal Dorothy knocks her head and gets, or actually goes out and finds this traveling salesman snake oil guy, wants to run away from home, and goes to this snake oil guy who talks her into going home instead of running away with his wagon train. And any of you know some of the other memes of American culture, another common one in movies and children's books is running away to the circus, where different people are well understood and they can do things that they weren't allowed to do in their own community, develop skills that they weren't allowed to do in their own community. And that has both a good and a challenging aspect to it. So, those are other kinds of stories that are more nuanced than many of the stories that we see nowadays, which basically bludgeon you with one ideology or another. Um, okay, so long and short of it, a storm is brewing, and the guy tells her she better hightail it home before the storm hits. And she goes home, and as she gets home, everybody is already in the storm cellar. She's looking for Annie M and everything, and can't find him, and gets knocked on the head by a shutter, which knocks her out. And then in her dream, she goes into this strange dream world. Okay, and I'm not going to cover the whole story beyond that, but I want you to think about two of the scenes from this movie. Now, when she comes into this dream world, she is made to realize that, oh, you just dropped your house, the house that you were in, which was in this storm, on top of a wicked witch. And the good witch who's telling her about this, Linda, says, oh, come out, Munchkins, you're all safe now. The wicked witch is dead. And they're all happy, happy, happy. And she's the hero for dropping her house on the wicked witch. Now, there's some interesting undercurrents you can get out of this. Okay, one is that in this alternate world that is being talked about, the kind of the message is that the ruling is done by either good or bad witches or good or bad wizards, which is kind of the common theme of a lot of the fantasy genre. And, if you've noticed how identity politics has crept into fantasy, you will know that they've sort of bifurcated into genres that are, or even genres in progress, have become more woke and politically correct by using sexual politics to make the females all the heroes and the males all the bad guys. It's not good to have wicked witches anymore. You can only have good witches. And so this story actually kind of plays up the beginnings of this bifurcation of the sexes into a battle mode where, oh, well, yeah, there's bad witches, but they only, are in that part of society. And this is actually the old version of communism, which was all about class struggle. And if you were in the high class, didn't matter whether you were a man or a woman, you were a bad guy. And if you were in the low class, the poor people, you were all saints and good guys that were oppressed people that needed to rise up and overthrow the bad guys. This is Marxism 1.0, and worked more or less in the Russian Revolution, but failed miserably in China. They had to develop cultural Marxism then. You'll notice this is not exactly my normal spiritual talk, and I apologize for that, but you can't really separate spirituality from politics. And this is where we're leading with this story. So let me get through the examples, the political examples of The Wizard of Oz, and then we'll start talking about the spiritual implications and some of the manifestations that you may not be aware of today. Okay, so the Munchkin scene, if you step back and look at what's going on, you've got basically a bunch of little people who are being terrorized by a bad witch who get liberated by a little girl, good witch, and a neighbor, good witch. And suddenly, happy, 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 everybody lives happily ever after, and the Munchkins have a perfect life under this so-called enlightened government of two witches. When you look at it from a political standpoint, it's kind of childish and dystopian to imagine that they're going to be much better off, much easier to manage their dealings with each other under the rule of witches who pop in and out whenever they feel like making an appearance and being worshipped by the Munchkins. Okay, later on, Dorothy and her crew of misfits find their way to the Emerald City, which is ruled by the great and powerful Wizard of Oz. This walled town, beautiful city that's got one gate. Gatekeeper makes it pretty hard to get in. And once they're in there, you get this wonderful song. I'm going to read this song to you because I want you to think about it politically. Oops, let me get my browser out. Politically as well as spiritually. The merry old land of Oz. There's a garden spot, I'm told, where it's never too hot and it's never too cold, where you're never too young and you're never too old, where you're never too thin or tall, and you're never, never, never too anything at all. Oh, you're not too mad and you're not too sane, and you don't compare and you don't complain. All you do is just sit tight, 'cause it's all so downright right. Ha ha ha, ho ho ho, and a couple of tra-la-las. That's how we laugh the day away in the merry old land of Oz. Buzz, 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 chirp, 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 and a couple of la-dee-dahs. That's how the crickets crick all day in the merry old land of Oz. We get up at 12 and start work at 1. Take an hour for lunch, and then at 2 we're done. Jolly good fun. Ha ha ha, ho ho ho, and a couple of tra-la-las. That's how we laugh the day away in the merry old land of Oz. Ha ha ha, ho ho ho, and a couple of tra-la-las. That's how we laugh the day away in the merry old land of Oz. Buzz, 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 chirp, 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 and a couple of la-dee-dahs. That's how the crickets crick all day in the merry old land of Oz. Blah, blah, blah. I think you get the idea. Okay, now that sounds all nice and well, and everything's perfect and idyllic from a childish point of view in this merry old land of Oz. But I want you to think about the implication of phrases like, you're never, never, never too anything at all. You're not too mad and you're not too sane, and you don't compare and you don't complain. All you do is just sit tight, because it's all so down, right, left, right. This is a message of authoritarian power. You don't complain. You're not too mad and you're not too sane. You just take your lumps of indoctrination like they're given and go on your merry way and live like you're being told to by the boob tube. And this is evidence that cultural Marxism was in play long before the cultural agenda in the US changed from my country 'tis of thee to my country 'tis an evil, which is where the culture is right now. The pop political culture is anti-American in America. People actively want to destroy their country, want to give it away to globalists or communists, become globalists or communists because they think that's better than the way that the country was traditionally run. This is the essence of cultural Marxism. Okay, so what does this have to do with false positivity? Well, many people will tell you that the only thing you need to fear is fear. Oh, if we weren't so afraid, we would stand up against the government and everything would be perfect. We would revolt for our side. We would declare independence for our state or our community. We would go out with our guns and shoot anybody that tried to push anything on us. You heard that. And this is what scares the people on the left. Scares them so shitless that they would support authoritarian policy of fake left politicians like Biden, Obama, or fake right politicians like the Bushes, the Clintons, which I consider fake right more than fake left. Hillary was, after all, a Goldwater girl. At any rate, enough of politics. So this has been going on politically, and I'm going to tell you that it is a huge part of what's been going on spiritually. Okay, so in the pandemic era, we've learned to accept, to understand words like false positive, false negative. This is terminology that you hear when you take these PCR tests, the rapid antigen tests, et cetera, et cetera. If you actually go and do your research and notice the people that are publishing data on these tests, there has been much argument over how many cycles to do the PCR before you get too many false positives. How few cycles you can do before you get too many false negatives. This is the real science behind testing, that it's possible to overtest something. And tests aren't just like a dial that says good, bad. This is bullshit from children's fiction. You remember the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the egg room, where the eggs are laid by the hens and they go down this chute, and there's a little meter that says good or bad, and the bad eggs get thrown in the trash and the good eggs go into production. This is childish bullshit fantasy. This is false positivism, a false belief in a system that is not as cut and dried, not as simple as a child would think it is. And this is how false positivity is even more dangerous than false negativity. If you question things, if you're a little bit fearful, if you don't trust everybody on face value, this is actually the essence of what good scientists do. This is the essence of what good researchers do. They don't accept everything at face value, or they don't accept just the things that match what they want to see, which is what critical thinking means. People don't realize that critical thinking is not open thinking. Critical thinking is looking at evidence, already knowing the truth that you want to prove from it, which is how woke scientists are doing their work, which is how corporate sellouts are doing their work. That's how they're designing their experiments. That's how they're testing their products. This happens in the material world, and it happens in the spiritual world. And this is what I would say is the darkest side of fear, because fear is a natural human emotion. And yes, it can be used to manipulate people, but just as much as the dopamine rush of happiness can, which is irrational lack of fear, lack of inhibition. And if you study much about date culture and date rape, you will know that drugs that reduce inhibition are very popular among young people who want to take advantage of other people, or older people who want to take advantage of young people. Sexual predators of all ages love these kind of drugs. And if you've ever heard me talk about the connection, you can look on my channel for more on this. There is a huge connection between drugs and spirituality, because the effect of drugs on us, the effect of our thoughts, are all spiritual. Anything that affects the mind is affecting the linkage between the mind and the soul, or the heart and the soul. All the primary organs of your body have their own oversoul, which can be fooled by different drugs, by different tricks played on your body by folks introducing substances whose souls are trained, are designed, are selected to do dark things. When somebody creates a new drug, gives it a name, puts a label on it, that drug gains a soul. This is the quantum truth of creation. Whatever we name, whatever we create, whatever we give a form to, that form solidifies into a truth of sorts. And this is why you've got a tribe of people who are absolutely convinced that they can think up anything and make it real. This is the essence of what they call the law of attraction. This is the essence of this high vibe tribe who think that, oh, if I just think good thoughts and force them on everybody around me, then good is going to happen. These folks are idiots. They're creating realities that are not sustainable. They may create a little local bubble of truth around them, but it doesn't match objective reality in the multiverse, and it's not sustainable. And if you've ever listened to me about how real creation works, it's about to create something that's permanent, you have to create enough energy behind that new idea that it will manifest permanently in the multiverse, or at least in one universe, so that it can't be removed. If you have an idea that is completely unsustainable due to the laws that pervade the whole multiverse, laws like karma, laws like the speed of light, laws like Planck's constant, things that we have observed and measured that seem to apply everywhere. Those laws are there because they have been thoroughly tested against other ideas for how you could organize that characteristic of matter, energy, or spirit, and have been found to be stable, to create stable, sustainable systems of creation. And anybody who is passionate about creation wants their creation to last, doesn't want it to be redefined, repurposed, reimagined, doesn't want their name associated with trash that somebody else is putting out. And this ties into an organization one of my friends pointed out to me recently. Let's see, what was it called? NEMEC. Look at, oh, my wife is about to give us a little demonstration of her art. Thank you. NEMEC is an interesting corporation that sprung up and has some spiritual underpinnings that my friend pointed out. He's been rather haunted by some visions, some dreams concentrated around Nemec. This company, I discover, is all about reimagining culture, delivering culture in new forms for the world. And some of its associates and so forth have been responsible for creating these new museums of sound and light bullshit, claiming, I saw one of them, I complained about it to a friend. I think it's probably related to this organization or one of its nefarious network of other organizations. They were claiming to be the Van Gogh experience. And I was looking at the pictures and the description of this electric light show, and there was nothing Van Gogh about it. None of the artistry, nothing was there. They didn't even show any of the paintings in this exhibit. And this is the kind of new age bullshit culture that they're trying to replace traditional culture with, reusing hallowed names like Van Gogh to sell trash, new age trash. And this is happening in the spiritual world. And this is much darker than the new forms of evil that are being sold through atheist materialism, communism, globalism, etc. Because the truth is, there are a lot of young, naive souls that they may become adults and be working at, quote, adult jobs and doing adult things like having kids and families, but they are still at heart children. Their moral values, their decision-making apparatus is operating at a child level. It's either all good because the TV said it was good, the channel I like, or the echo chambers I subscribe to on social media tell me this is good, or it's all bad because the bad guy, Orange Man Bad or somebody said it, and now they're telling me what is bad, and Satan is coming from Satan's own mouth in a little soundbite. And this goes on all sides. Every agenda is working on these low consciousness souls. And that's kind of inevitable. They're the easiest ones to sway with propaganda. And spiritual propaganda is some of the most effective. This is why we have so many people who think they are so smart by signing up for the cosmic oneness silliness. Even scientists, physicists, researchers who in their own field are very scientific, in the spiritual realm, they don't want to deal with it, so they take the first level of spirituality and make it their religion. And this is false positivity. Especially anything that tells you there is one right, perfect solution for everybody. That is very dark positivity. That's an elitist positivity that says my religion is better than yours. I'm superior to you. Anything you say that challenges my belief system, I have to laugh at, or I have to deride, because I know I'm so superior to you. And I've had these conversations with some of these oneness freaks. Whenever I challenge their echo bubble that says, oh, well, if I just meditate enough and kill my ego, I'm going to go to nirvana. I'm going to be with Source again, and everything will be perfect. I'm just a little piece of Source experiencing all this suffering and pain in this body, but when I get back to Source, I'm going to be part of God again. This is insanity. Absolutely insane. It's no smarter than reading the Bible and saying that, well, God must be evil because he allowed so much evil stuff to happen. Or anybody that doesn't believe God the way I do, doesn't worship God the way I do, is evil because they're different than me. Not because of any actual deeds or thoughts they did, but just because their beliefs are different. They get tagged with evil. This is false positivism breeds false dualities, just like false negativism. Negativism. You want to give me a kiss? Oh, okay. I almost got a kiss there. At any rate, I've got to tell you, folks, this may hurt, but if you are in one of these bubbles that is beyond challenge to your belief, I put all my faith in Jesus. I let Jesus run my life. I put all my faith in my guru. My guru says if I just meditate like he does and pay him my dues, then within 2 years I'm going to be enlightened. And I've seen it. Oh, one time when I was meditating, I saw the light. Oh, it was so bright and it felt so warm and loving and accepting. And oh, I want to get back to source. I know I'm going to get back to source if I just ignore everything going on around me until I'm ready to die. There are people that are that stupid. Stupid with a capital STUPID. And they think they are smart. They think they are smart in disconnecting from what's going on into their little bubble of imaginary friend protection from evil, protection from reality. And this is actively being promoted by the same people that are promoting divisive hate buckets to put people in. It's just another side of their agenda. And if you've been listening to my recent talks, call them sermons if you will know that it is the agenda ultimately of an entity, Borg, that wants to control everything. The authoritarian, almighty micromanager of the universe wants to be that for the multiverse. Got to conquer God's universe first. Got to conquer both its and God's universe through its agents. And its agents are all tools of authoritarian rule, whether they proclaim themselves as enlightened or not. And these tribes of Borg agents work most effectively through the good witch Glindas of our culture and our science. And as I have been telling you, this whole disclosure bullshit about the ETs is not about telling you the truth about ETs. It's about telling you a truth. The truth that the folks that have been covering stuff up in many governments want you to hear. Oh, the world is going to be saved by the Andromedans who want to bring you their worship of the mighty feminine goddess of the universe. This is what they're telling people to this very day. The news is coming out and is being spread among the ufologist enthusiast community. And a lot of them are lapping it up like pablum. They finally, the truth is coming out. Oh, these brave truth tellers that escape from this horrible, this Luis Elizondo guy. What a fucking fake. You got to wise up, people. You're being played both ends against the middle. You're smarter than that, most of you, if you just stop to think about it. Think about it like you do the things that are really important in your life, like you do when you're thinking about getting into a relationship, getting out of a relationship, taking a job, having children. It's that big a decision for you to decide what is real news and what is fake, and to do a little bit of research and not just jump on whatever sounds the most appealing of the day. Oh, there's a cavalry charge coming from the Andromedans. Oh, there's a cavalry charge coming from Trump and Elon Musk. There may be white hats in that, and it may actually be happening. But unless you absolutely know that that's what's going on, be suspicious. Because if you know the history of the past 100 years of humanity, you know that evil authoritarian regimes have come from both the right and the left, have come from both ultra-nationalist fascists, like the Nazis, and ultra-nationalist communists, like the USSR, like communist China. At the root, these organizations are all very exclusive and all very racist. You see that in what's going on in both Ukraine and Russia today. There are ultra-nationalists on both sides, and the Russian side retains more of an ultra-nationalist communist stamp, and the Ukraine side retains the ultra-nationalist globalist stamp, globalist fascist, which is more of the Nazi brand of evil. And yes, there are active groups in the Ukraine that are neo-Nazis that the fake left is fawning over and giving money. The Azov Battalion is neo-Nazi, nationalist, fascist. Get over it. The pro-Putin tribe in Russia is pro-Putin because he represents the power that Russia once exerted as the great hero of communism in the world. We can't keep letting these patterns repeat, and they don't repeat. Not exactly. The folks that think that everything is cyclical and we need to just go around to another turn, we need to set out new Dorothys on their way to find their way home. This is also kind of a cyclical thing about that story, right? What happens in the end? Dorothy goes back home with a power that apparently she always had, back to the very same life she had before, without a change. Just now knowing that, well, if I didn't have it already, then I never really needed it. Which is kind of a stupid cyclical message that one might give to folks who are suffering in the Depression. Oh, well, if we don't have anything, well, nobody has anything right now, so be glad and don't complain. There's a lot of the messaging that was going out during the Great Depression, especially was accelerated when people started marching on Washington, farmers and stuff like that, demanding that the government do something about the horrible problem that was happening, which a lot of it originated from monetary policy, but a lot of it was natural too. Anyone who knows about the era knows about the Dust Bowl, how the Midwest of the country was, the soil was blowing away because it wasn't being used properly. because everybody was falling all over themselves trying to make as much money by growing the crops that the corporate cats wanted to buy for export, cash crops, instead of the traditional crops that worked in these drier areas that had been farmed successfully using crop rotation and planting things that would keep the soil in place when a field was being kept fallow for a while and not becoming dependent on chemical fertilizers. That's what the Depression was all about, the Great Depression back in the 1930s. It was both political, economic, and environmental. It was not the first great success of communism in the US. Hail, great Lord FDR. FDR was not a communist. He was a globalist. He was a member of the rich fat cat set that are behind the communist globalist effort right now, the George Soros set, the Bill Gates folks, the Mark Zuckerberg folks, the Jeff Bezos folks. They don't give a flying fuck about America. They don't give a flying fuck about their customers, as long as they can make as much money as possible and just basically make money for doing nothing, funneling money, newly created money, into their coffers, which is what these folks do during downturns. You're being played on many levels. On a material level, on a spiritual level, every which way. And they want to take your life, your freedom, your soul. And ultimately, it's your soul that's most important, because that's what's going to last. When you give up this life, and it ends, and it will, I promise you, you will not just rot in the ground and be gone forever like an atheist might think. They are wrong. And I can prove it. There is evidence that proves they are dead wrong. You go on. There is a soul. Everything has a soul. Every soul has many lives in many incarnations. This is truth. This is spiritual truth. This is physical truth. This is the truth of why we have conflicting emotions, conflicting ideas, because we don't just have one brain doing all our thinking for us. We have a soul, which uses a brain as a coprocessor, which uses the heart as a coprocessor, which even uses the sexual organs as a coprocessor. Each of these organs has their own oversoul that has their own interface, consciousness interface, with the organ that they manage, and will try to communicate with the other souls, either physically through the nervous system, the spine, or spiritually through its spiritual manifestation, which is not just the chakra system. There's more to it than the 7 chakras of Eastern philosophical religion. There's more than just the pentagram 5-pointed star magic of the occult system. You got to add them together to get the 12, to understand how God's magic works. How any real spiritual power works reliably for any length of time. You may see somebody who has the power of healing. They can, ooh, I'm going to touch you, and you're going to fall back, and you're going to feel better, and maybe some people do. because the power of belief is very, very powerful. Yes, there's no doubt about it. But the power of belief has a very short lived lifetime if that belief is not consistent with the laws of the multiverse, which are both physical and spiritual laws. Yes, faith healings do happen, but they do fail. And if you investigate the literature on faith healings, you will find that it's a very mixed record, even for those in any religion or tradition in any part of the world are looked at in detail. You will see that yes, there's many successes but many failures. Initial successes that then you check up a few years later. Oh well, the person had a relapse and they died just like they were supposed to have died before. Question. Don't accept. False positivity is just as dangerous as false negativity. There are things you should be afraid of, like losing your soul, selling your soul, or giving your soul to an entity that's not going to want to give it back easily. You should be afraid of that, very afraid, and very cautious. There are things you are falsely afraid of, which are causing you anxiety you don't need. That's true too, but it's not the whole truth. Anybody that is preaching, oh, you got to let go of your fears. You got to let go of your fears and just embrace the light, unconditional love, and peace and harmony. That's just as bad, just as evil. You cannot ignore real evil. You cannot ignore real things to be feared. And there are governments out there all over the world that should be feared for what they've done to your neighbors and friends, the lies they've created to do those things, and to make it look like they did them for your own good instead of to maintain the power of their cabal of elite that run that country. I don't want this to come off as negative, but you need to understand that even though God's team is winning, and I keep telling you that we've already won this battle, the battle over the earths, God's earth is finished with the experiment it was here to conduct. We invented the best version of karma yet, which has been deemed good enough to let out of the test tube of earth and infect the rest of the universe with, the multiverse with. Every soul that is reincarnated from this experiment is going to be carrying the seeds of that new version of karma with them, even if they're reborn on a Borg world, in the Borg universe, or on a world that hasn't even been charted or colonized or conquered by either side yet. That's what's going to happen to a lot of you souls who aren't needed for what humanity is going to be working on in the future. We're turning into a God species. And that's the bit of truth that is truth in folks who were telling you about ascension, folks who were telling you about new earth. That may be the only piece of truth that they're telling you, because the rest of the story about what they're saying about how you get there, oh, you just have to believe in Jesus and you're going to be one of the 144,000 that are gonna go on to whatever. There's a lot of tribes of nonsense, false positivity. And to the extent that they are telling you some simple formula to be one of the ones that is going to be carrying the torch of our species forward after this event concludes, which I'm telling you doesn't have much longer, a few decades, something like that, they're lying to you. Because what's going to happen is there's going to be a shift of what kind of souls are going to be accepted when they say, well, I want to be human in the next incarnation. They're up in heaven, planning their next life. They're not going to get the same old advisors they got before that said, oh, well, gosh, let's go down to New York City and there's a nice family that's going to have a baby. And, oh, they're immigrants from Eastern Europe. And that's a good tribe to be part of now. This is how lives were chosen for some people in the past. You're going to go to heaven next time, most of you, and you're going to be given options like, well, I think you might need to experience this planet over here, which, it's a lot easier to be one of their intelligent species because they don't have any sex. And you've been so conflicted with the sex in this last life that we think that it's just too much stress for you. So, we're gonna. How about we place you on this other planet where they have no sex and they have a very stable government. Oh, the government hasn't been changed in millions of years. It works so well, and I think you'll be really, really happy there. What do you think? And you're going to say, yeah, well, I'm up for that. Hell, I remember what I just experienced in, half a dozen incarnations as a human on Earth, and that sounds a lot better. And there you go. You're going to get to spend a while on a Borg planet run by a hive mind, finding out what it's like to be a drone or a worker bee or an attack drone hitchhiking on planets to go invade them with Borg spores. All kinds of dark stuff that you're going to be doing in your next life if you don't wise up. Now, not everybody's going to get to come back as human again, even if you do wise up. But there are better species to land in. Some of the species that are still fighting against Borg, that are conflicted, where there's still people trying to break free from mind control, trying to break free from pretty little illusions that sting them anytime they try to disbelieve. There are planets that are just starting to develop intelligent life that haven't faced being part of this great struggle and are going to be given the opportunity to grow up in a universe, in a world that never had to deal with all that never got invaded by Borg, that only had to deal with their own conflicting ideas of what was right, what was wrong, who only had to make their own government and not see their governments taken over by some external mind controlling force, which you can't deny. You see around you. You have governments, whole governments, acting in ways that are absolutely in 180-degree opposition to what's good for their country, what's good for themselves, what's good for their family. These people are either brainwashed or they are entities that don't really have any loyalty to your country, that are plants from Borg or other species allied with Borg, who are put here with the specific purpose to destroy, confuse, befuddle, get humanity to destroy each other. There are species like that among the ETs, among spiritual entities in other dimensions that we don't see, whose agenda is the destruction of humanity. Either because they don't know that the Earth game is over, or because they know it's over and they want to do as much damage as they can before we head into the 8th day of creation and start, doing the real Star Trek mission of taking true spirituality, true godly government based on understanding of karma, based on understanding the immortality of the soul, based on understanding what it means to transgress against another soul, which is very different than the concepts that were taught as sin in the Bible or any of the religions that grew out of it. Now, there's some great ideas now. Thou shalt not kill is a pretty good idea. But as anybody who's been put in a place where they had to make a killing decision, it's not an easy decision to make. There is moral hazard there. And that's why there are stories within the Bible that really express that moral hazard very well and in ways that you can relate to if you understand about Borg. Like God telling Isaac, or who is it, to sacrifice his son. Now, how warped is that? What God worth worshiping would put Job or Abraham through the trials that they did just to make them prove how much they worshiped God? This is Borg. This is not the real God. This is not the real law. The Mosaic Law was an approximation at a decent set of rules for a tribe to live by. An isolated tribe in a very sparsely populated world. And you have only to look around in context in the Bible to see that those laws were not very effective. You have only to look throughout the Bible to see that the idea of monotheism and militant monotheism, my God is the only God, and everybody else's God or religion is shit that we need to wipe out, that's the work of Borg. That's the work of the evil one. If you worship your God like that, you are serving evil. I'm sorry. I don't care whether you are the scion of your church, biggest tither, biggest volunteer, you do the most work for your community. If you have this idea that God is your almighty, authoritarian, micromanaging friend who will do anything you say because you are so devoted, will grant any prayer because you are so holy, you're serving Borg. And at some point, you're going to be put in a position where your morality will be questioned by this attitude. Where some other church, some other organization does something in your community that your church feels passionately about and gets militantly involved in the politics of your community, of your country, of your world. And when you let that happen, you are serving Borg. There's no one that wants to escalate a war that is going to react with a bleeding heart bullshit response and want to go to war that knows the first thing about war. Anybody who knows anything about how wars work, about how geopolitics works, would be pushing for negotiation, would be pushing for open discussion of grievances on both sides. Because I can promise you, if you look into this situation around the world, not just Ukraine, Russia, but the situation with India and Pakistan, with China and all its neighbors, there are two sides to this story. Now, in some cases, I will say that my net feeling is that there is a greater evil. The Chinese Communist Party is absolutely a greater evil. The globalist cabal who want to run the world through a crony capitalist UN are a greater evil. This is not how we want globalism to work. This is not the kind of superpower that we want to be dominated by. Does that mean the United Nations will never work? That we can never have a one world government? No. But it's got to be built upon godly foundations. It's got to be built upon an understanding of the truth, of the real God, and the law of karma, and the other laws that are inherently obvious that grow out of that, the laws of humanity, human nature. There are mutable laws, immutable behaviors that are coded into our soul vehicle. There are some characteristics that are going to be much more likely among men, much more likely among women. Not universal. We don't have to push everybody into the same mold, but we have to understand that those are patterns. You can't destroy a pattern by saying it doesn't exist. This is insane, false positivity. Okay? It is not healthy to think, oh, well, if you want to be a woman and have children, then we'll just find some way to modify you and be able to implant embryos in you so you can have babies. This is fucked up. This is incredibly screwed up and does not understand that the soul chose whatever vehicle you're in, male or female. It was a choice. If you're conflicted about it, it's because you took a challenging choice. You took it because you were hoping to learn something from it. And I know that personally. I have remembered many, many, many of my past incarnations. And some were completely sexless, had no sense of having a sexual identity at all. And I had some that I've definitely been a female. I'm not sure in this species, but in other ones. I was a female bear-like creature, or pig or something, kind of a bear pig sort of thing. And yeah, it felt weird to have breasts. It felt weird to have this motherly instinct in a proportion that I've not had in this life. Am I going to go reincarnate and choose to be a woman again? I don't know. Probably not. I'm comfortable. I'm very comfortable being a man. Most people who get to know me will say, well, I mean, if I'd been born in today's era as the same Rob Trump I was when I was a child, they would have been encouraging me to identify as female because I was too sensitive. I cried too easily. Especially with music or art, I was very, very passionate. They are taking young boys and saying, oh, well, that must mean that you really want to be female. So let's encourage you to identify at a very young age. This is insane. These people are fucking insane. They're criminals. And I don't mind saying it online. Attack me, cancel me, whatever you want to do. This is the truth of the matter. You are committing a spiritual crime against that child, a karmic crime, which you are going to pay for. If you're one of the active proponents of that, you're going to pay for when you die by becoming a more active player in the Borg universe, because you are for the enemy. It's fine what you want to do with your own body when you're responsible, because you have a karmic duty to your parents until, and to yourself, frankly, to follow the lead of your parents and the prevailing culture until you're old enough to make decisions for yourself. Children are not capable of making adult decisions. Well, some of them are. Okay, I have met some children, like myself, who was born very different, a very old soul who, from the moment I was born, I'd look at my brothers, my two older brothers, and think, my God, what's wrong with them? Why are they so violent? Why do they treat people so bad? Why do they use and manipulate people and give my parents so much hardship? And, third child, middle child comes along, and hey, I'm just here to get along. That doesn't mean I'm going to conform. I'm going to actively join my oldest brother's or my second brother's team. I'm going to try to participate in both their worlds. And my oldest brother was actually artistic too, so I participated in his world more. He's the one that taught me my love of classical music. My second brother's world was a world of your typical American boy, dissecting frogs, pulling pranks on people, lighting the gay kid in this Boy Scout troop on fire, tying him to a tree and lighting him on fire. Yep. My second oldest brother did that, and I hated the bastard for doing things like that and treating me like that, because my personality was not like a mainstream American male was supposed to be at the time. And I'm telling you, you're doing as much or worse to young men these days by assuming that if they are sensitive, assuming if they display too much of the feminine archetype, that it must mean that they were born in the wrong sex and they need to become women. This is insane. This is sick, and it needs to stop. You folks are criminals. Crimes against God. Crimes against karma. You are participating in the biggest crime syndicate in the multiverse. The side of Borg is a crime syndicate. Just like the authoritarian governments of the world, the Chinese Communist Party is an international crime syndicate. The globalist cabal that seem to control every corporate cartel, every big tech corporation, every media outlet, and the financial system of the world are part of Borg's army, willingly or unwillingly. If you participate in that, if you look the other way because, hey, I gotta get a job, I gotta do this, I'm sorry. You're selling out. Selling out is a crime, is a karmic crime. You may not get punished for it in this life, and you actually may end your life on retirement, living a good life in your McMansion, watching CNN and thinking the world is all hunky-dory and happy, and wondering why they're persecuting these freedom fighters and peaceful activists, and Antifa and BLM. Oh, I'm so righteous about that. You're a sellout. You're seeing the false positivity that you become comfortable with. You tune out anything negative because, oh, well, I don't need to see that. It's just a bunch of bad people. Those Trumpies, they're so horrible. They're always talking dirt on everybody and making fun of us and oh, that's so evil, so evil. I'm sorry, you have no fucking idea what real evil is. False positivity tribes. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you. You guys, your souls are at the most risk. You may be sitting on the sidelines thinking, I'm going to disconnect from this and live in my little McMansion. I'm going to go move to Florida or Texas, buy a little spread and do some prepping and buy some guns and just disconnect from all this. That's not playing for the good guys. I'm sorry. That's a cop out. You can't ignore what's going on. It will affect you. It will affect you because it's going to change your path of what happens in the near future. I don't know which of the earth you are going to finish your life in. That's what I've been telling you about how karma works, how the Mandela effect works. You're flipping between different versions of the earth with your decisions, your major decisions, your karmic decisions. And some of the versions of earth are going to see very dark apocalyptic events. And others are going to see strange things happen, like what happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis. If you have the same memory of that as this cat, what happened then? We were very, very close to an accidental nuclear proliferation during a very, very tense time between the US and Russia over missile bases being built in Cuba, which would have had the capability to blanket the US with both conventional and nuclear weapon attacks, which could have overwhelmed even the much larger arsenal of the US. And during this very tense period of we've got to stop this for the Americans and we've got to accelerate this for the Russians, there was a glitch in the Russians' fail-safe system. And a Russian operator, just a low-level grunt member of the, I don't know, what did they call their army? People's Liberation Army is what they called it. Red Guards. I don't know what they call them in Russia, in the USSR, but just a low-level grunt soldier taught to do this when you see the red light flash kind of stuff. This was low tech back then. And instead of pushing the button that would have started World War III back in the 1960s, he hesitated. And he said, I know I'm supposed to do this by my training, by the law, but I just can't see this being right. I'm going to question it. He called his superior. Somehow his superior agreed, and they went up the chain and got talking to Khrushchev, who was in the middle of negotiations with Kennedy, and they ended up telling the truth that to each other and avoiding what would have been the end of humanity. And it was a whole series of jelly side up events that made this happen, starting with that lowly soldier. Could have easily gone any other way. This is how synchronicities happen in God's universe. This is how the divine plan happens, despite the free will choices of trillions, trillions, and trillions of souls involved in the process. Your body has trillions of cells, trillions of little souls that materialist scientists will say somehow by random interactions will get you to say ba ba da da, to push buttons on your keyboard and write Shakespearean plays. It's insane. Materialists are insane. But they're no more insane than fundamentalist believers in one God, one all powerful, micromanaging God that's going to do everything. That doesn't work. That's why Borg always loses to God's team, because you can't push all the buttons. You can try, but there's always going to be somebody questioning. And it's those that question Borg that always win the game in the end. That's why God invented the game of souls. The good site's always going to win, but it's got to be challenging enough so all the new souls will learn something from it. Have you ever played a video game that was so easy that you could master it in 10 minutes? Did you ever pay for that game? Did you ever recommend that game? No. You said, what a shitty game. That's for children. And you went on and you found a more challenging game. Not too challenging, because nobody likes to die every time they get in the first encounter. And that's what being human has been like for some of us that have been here helping out with this experiment. It seems pretty dark. It seems like crap. Every time I incarnate, I have the same problems over again or worse ones. And I want to disconnect. I don't want to do this anymore. This is where Buddha got. If you read about the life of Buddha, you study about what went on with the Prince Gautama, this is the path he went through. And in a much more easy way than you, because he started out life as a prince in a palace with slaves, the heir to a kingdom, and voluntarily chose to go through and see, well, let's see how everybody else lives, because I need to understand this. This is the difference between a real prophet and a false prophet. There are many false prophets out there who have never experienced real privation, have never experienced real loss, who just had the briefest of happy spiritual encounters, and wow, if I just show everybody how to do this thing, I can make a ton of money, because it's really popular to tell somebody something they want to hear. And even if I have 1,000 unhappy customers, if I can get like 1,000,000 followers that are down with my product, I'm going to make 1,000,000. And if I can get sponsors and media coverage, oh, I'm going to be so rich. And there are a whole bunch of fake prophets out there who've fallen off the bandwagon at the very first level of spirituality, the basic first layer of awakening. This is not how being a prophet works. It's very hard. It's very difficult. You have to go through periods of temptation, privation. I've been there. You have to go through dark nights of the soul where it seems like somebody is messing with your mind and getting you to do things, to experience things that you've never experienced, just because that's something that you have to have experienced before you're really capable of telling anybody anything. I've been homeless. I've been a homeless crazy guy on a street for a few days and ended up in a mental asylum for it. And I think you should still listen to me, because that was a learning experience. I know why I had that experience. I know why I had to have that experience. And if I had not had these shifts between revelation and payment for revelation and processing of revelation, I would never have been able to bring all this content to you that I'm trying to bring to you. It hasn't been easy. And I don't have a great following yet. Does that mean I'm going to stop? Fuck no. People are going to start listening because their old gods are going to start failing them. Their old truths, their old comfort zone, their old false positivity or false negativity is going to start failing them. And they're going to be looking for new truth. Not just materialist truth, not just political truth. They're going to be looking for spiritual truth. Because spirit is where it's all at. That's the real meaning of life. The meaning of life is not retiring and getting to the end of it with a McMansion and a happy family and a bunch of grandkids, money in the bank, sitting on the porch watching CNN. You're not going to feel satisfied at the end of that life. You're going to get to your deathbed and you're going to have regrets. I know you're going to have regrets and you're going to have doubts about where you're going. And you're going to be scared to the fucking depth of your soul and looking for any God you could possibly pray to that will get you out of that feeling of discomfort that comes at the end of life. And sadly, that's Borg's greatest opportunity, recruiting opportunity. Because you are so desperate at that point, you'll cling to anything. And that's why so many people get turned by this bright light gate of heaven experience. This is an invitation to heaven. It was an experience invented by the Borg team to make souls want to die before they'd completed their soul mission in this incarnation. This is where the motivation for people that really do commit suicide come from. They want to have this bright light experience. God, there's something in me that tells me there's something better than the life I've got. If I just end my life, it's going to be better. How many people contemplating suicide have you talked to that will tell you things like that? Maybe in confidence because they don't want to admit it. But this is why many religions hide the fact of reincarnation. Hide the fact of, yeah, heaven's a place you're going to go for a while, get some guidance, and then choose another life. Because they're afraid. They're afraid too many people will commit suicide. Not because they're really wanting to hide anything from you, not because they intended something bad, although they did by hiding the truth. Because if you hide the truth, it's eventually going to come back and bite you. And lying about the truth of God, lying about the truth of karma, lying about the truth of reincarnation, lying about the truth of the immortal soul is not a little white lie. It's a huge, huge spiritual lie. And is at the root of all of humanity's problems right now. And those lies were promoted by the great liar, the prince of lies, the real Satan, Borg, the anti-God, who is the God that many of you are actually worshiping. Those special friends that you talk to and they do things for you. They say, oh, if you just do this, and then I'll give you that. Those are devils. Those are not gods. Those are not spiritual guides that are talking to you. A real servant of God sends inspiration, sends ideas, sends a spark, and lets you decide how to act on it. The dark ones are the ones that tell you, oh, you need to go tell humanity this. You need to go tell them that. The stuff I'm telling you was not passed on by anybody. The only two spiritual entities I've ever encountered directly didn't give me any orders. One said, you've been given a great gift, use it wisely. And the other just glared at me like, you bastard, you defeated me again. Everything else I'm telling you has come through this weird power I have since my spiritual awakening, thinking about stuff, thinking about what people tell me or what I see on YouTube or in the news and doing my own research, and then I'll sleep on it and say, come on, let's figure this out. What's the deeper story here? And this is what I present on my channel. This is what I present in my books, deeper stories. And sometimes they get more depth. Every time I've had one of these dark night of the soul gyrations, these challenging times where it seems like I'm living in two realities at the same time, multi-dimensional experience, which some of you may have experienced and are still struggling with, and the world is thinking you insane for. Every time I go through that, I come up with some better nuance of what's really going on. I have a much better understanding of karma than I did when I started out. And you'll maybe notice that if you read my book, that my book doesn't get into some of the depth that I'm talking about now. It will if I can get around to writing another chapter. I started writing it, and the work in progress was destroyed when my computer was zapped a few weeks ago. I was a little bit miffed at first, but I thought, well, that just probably means that it wasn't the right time for that information, or it needed to be more refined. And in the course of presenting some of my recent content, delving into this real model of creation involving God and Borg and the male demiurge, the female demiurge, and karma, I have within that understanding of 5 spiritual entities a much better understanding than I had when I was originally kind of working from a model of 3. My earlier work, you hear me talk about Trinity a lot. And now I understand, the significance of 5 much better. This is how enlightenment happens. This is how you go up levels. This is why, the 5th dimension is progress, but it's not like understanding the 12th dimension. The 11 dimensions that are being posed by physicists are much better approximation of the truth, but they don't reflect a 12th dimension, and the fact that I've been telling you that above 12, other dimensions, other universes are just like a post office box. Once you hit the level that you're aware that you have sort of your own alternate universe that you wink out to when you're making choices that are inconsistent with the pattern, the path of the universe you're playing in. This is how parallel universes come and go all the time. It's not until you get to the God level, the 9th level of spiritual awareness, of consciousness, that your universe becomes something that is permanent, that doesn't wink and out, that you in and out. This is what rising to the God level means. You have your own universe now. Universe of physical creation. You don't own the spiritual world. The spiritual realms are like a shared space. Some of them are semi-private, but they all answer to karma. Every different heaven, whether it's Christian heaven or Muslim heaven or whatever, has to follow the path of evolution laid out by karma. Religions that don't serve to create good karma and discourage bad karma will eventually be distanced from God's universe and God's part of the spiritual realm that is sort of the ether that physical universes are built within. And so I'm biased. I'm telling you what I'm telling you is a bad choice. What is evil may not be bad or evil to you. But I think most souls like their independence, like to be able to have free thought, like to be able to express their thoughts, like to be able to say no once in a while to what's going on around them. And those are the souls that I represent in my ministry, if you will. If I'm not talking to you, don't listen to me. But if there's any spark in you that says, whoa, I feel challenged, I feel threatened, I feel triggered by what Rob is saying here, why don't you explore it a bit more? Because if you feel triggered, not because I'm a bad guy, it's because you're being challenged in your core beliefs. This is what triggers us. This is what creates this allergic response to truths that we don't like. This is why truths are being suppressed. This is why people are trying to censor others. Oh, but what they're saying is so bad. It's so triggering. It's so evil. No. If you think like that, you think like a servant of Borg. You only want, you're like the three wise monkeys, you know? See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. This is not a philosophy of righteousness. This is the philosophy of somebody who wants to be part of an authoritarian society. The culture that created those three wise monkeys, they call them that, three wise monkeys. They're not wise, they're stupid. They're souls that want to be dominated, that just want to operate within a little safe space of their own family and hide all their family's dealings from everyone else for fear that somebody with more power is going to take it away. And that's the way Chinese people have operated since the beginning of history. This is Asian culture all over. I see it here in Indonesia. I've seen it in all the other Asian countries I've been in. I've seen it in the remnants of the earlier cultures of South America. The Native Americans were not these wonderful, holy, oh, let's get along. They were authoritarian. They were ruled by lords, Inca lords, who walked on their servants' backs because they didn't want to touch the ground. And yeah, that happened in European society too. But this East versus West bullshit just has to end. It is the most hateful, culturally Marxist lie that is going about the world right now. East good, West bad. It's fucking stupid and it needs to stop. And there is absolutely no historical basis for it whatsoever. Oh, the Europeans colonized the world and they were imperialism. Bullshit. Read about the Chinese admiral, Zheng He, who set out on exactly the same conquistador type of expeditions way before the Portuguese or Spanish started doing the same. Conquered much Korea, Japan, the Philippine Islands, conquered some, put puppet governments in others, established Chinese trading posts that lorded it over the locals and took them over by essentially demographic imperialism. It's not peaceful. It's not anything like you think it is if you're one of these neo-Marxist communist stooges playing for the enemy in the US or in Europe or anywhere else. You're being misled. You're being misled by false positive narratives. Communism is not a populist story. Its inventors were Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, part of the European elite of the 19th century. children of the rich folks who had been bringing back Eastern ideas and Eastern culture to Europe, and saw how easily it was for Asian empires, Asian imperialists, the Chinese Empire, the Gupta dynasty, etc., the Mughals, to dominate their people with Easternized versions of religion and philosophy and spirituality and government. They brought those models to Europe and said, well, how can we change these? How can we westernize Eastern thought and use it to control Europe again? Because at that time, the 1800s, was a time of great turmoil in Europe after seeing the success of the American Revolution and the near success of the French Revolution, which they were able to turn by encouraging the Mr. Big, mini me Napoleon to turn what was similar to the American Revolution into something very dark and hateful and imperialist. They were scared of that. They were scared of the ferment that was going and the amount of pressure that was building amongst people who wanted a real rule of law by a real republic, by a real constitution that provided a real system of representation where people could vote for what they wanted, but not manipulate the whole country by by building up demagogues. You need to look up this term if you're not familiar with it. A demagogue is a character that grows up in a democracy that represents the moneyed interest, has enough money to buy votes, to buy influence. This is why pure democracy does not work, never has, never will. Read up on the Athenian democracy. The first democracies in the world were incredible failures. They were taken over by demagogues who were members of the old aristocracy that controlled the oligarchy that preceded the democracy. All normal democracy, pure democracy, is going to get you is another oligarchy. All these populist ideas of, well, if our party just controlled everything, everything would be perfect. Bullshit. This is false positivity. If you're buying into any of these narratives, you need mental help. You need mental help more than anyone in a mental institution today. Prove I'm wrong. If you're in any of these tribes, you're so convinced of what's right, what's good, how things should be, you are mentally deranged. Intelligent people know that compromise, trial and error, experimentation is how you get good government, not dictation by any party, any special interest group that thinks they know better than anybody else how to make good government on earth or in heaven. Okay, I think I've talked long enough. I hope I get some listeners on this one. I think it was a very good talk. And, well, don't follow the yellow brick road. Try to find the stairway to heaven. Maybe a tougher path, but it's the only one going up. Till next time, this is Rob Trump with the Omnis Hour. Thanks for tuning in.